have one more very interesting talk before we end today's session, and that would be by our expert speaker, Mr. Kiruba Shankar, who will be speaking about creating a socially engaged workforce, role of HR leaders. Kiruba is a digital entrepreneur, professional speaker, author of 5 books, professor of digital marketing, podcaster, and an organic farmer. He is the CEO of Business Blogging, a social media consulting firm, and Kiruba has 24 years of work experience in the digital domain. And now please welcome on the stage Mr. Kiruba Shankar.
Thanks a lot, Maisha. In fact, the previous speech I gave, the person who introduced me said that Kiruba is such a cool person. I was so happy until somebody pointed out the dictionary meaning of cool. It means not so hot. So I was less impressed after that. Fantastic. When I go back to India and when people ask me what's the one thing that stood out for you in Maldives, I'll tell you what. At 5 o'clock in the evening, I'm seeing the same amount of crowd that I saw at 9 o'clock in the morning. Isn't this awesome? Absolutely, kudos, really, that's brilliant. I have a few questions for you. I want you to listen to these questions carefully and answer them in your mind. And later, we'll see if our answers match. Name the tool that is responsible for the highest road accidents in the world. All right? If somebody said car, you're really brilliant. No. The second question, name the tool that is the biggest stealer of work time. Okay? And the third one, what's the tool that is responsible for insomnia or lack of sleep? What's the answer? We all know that. It's common sense. Yet, if it's created the highest number of deaths in the world, if it's stealing away all our time, and if it's creating sleepless nights, why isn't that none of the countries in the world has ever banned a mobile phone? In fact, mobile phones are the highest selling, numbers keep improving. And the reason why I took this example is because it's the same analogy that comes to social media. And we are all HR professionals, right? Around the world, I've been to 24 countries, and there's one thing that I've seen it common across is that we all want our employees to be super productive because that's how companies win. And we see social media has a huge time sink. It steals away time. It's a huge distraction. It lowers productivity. Yeah? It absolutely is. Right? But just because social media has a few downsides, much like how a mobile phone has a few downsides, there's so much more upsides to what social media can have. And having socially engaged employees can do absolute wonders to companies. And that is the subject of the next 27 minutes that I'm going to be talking on. So let's take a few examples. Here's a question, and I want to crowdsource answers from all of you. So if I could just request you, I'm a huge believer. So one of the 6 books that I've written is called Unconference, Why the Knowledge of the Audience is Always Higher Than That of One Single Speaker. So I want to walk the talk, and I'm going to request all of you to take up your mobile phone, fire up your browser, go to menti.com, menti.com, and it'll ask you for a code, and that's the code that you find on the screen. When you type in that code, you will find the question, which is, what are the benefits that your company can get if you can encourage your employees to be socially active? And I want you to type in your answer, whatever you feel is the right one. Take 20 seconds. A brief answer is fine. I love how all of you pretend like you're typing the answer, but you're secretly checking your WhatsApp. I see you, right? All right. So thank you for that. So do type in your answers. And I want to, so let's get into a deal. And the deal is I will answer one point that I believe that companies can benefit from, and then I'm going to throw it out to you guys, and let's see which one of you can answer. The first one who answers gets a big bar of Cadbury's um, nuts chocolate. It's a really massive bar. So let's see who goes first. Okay. So the first one is the biggest benefit that I see companies can truly win is by creating awesome thought leaders. And let me illustrate that with an example. What you're seeing on the screen is a very fuzzy photo. That's because it was taken from a CCTV camera. So it's not very clear. But if you look very closely to, where's that? To here, this guy. So this guy is actually this guy. He's standing in a metro subway station in Washington, D.C. on a Monday morning, 8 o'clock, start of a rush hour. He's standing out with his violin, and he starts to play the best of Bach, classical music. And he's so deeply engrossed in the music. He plays for about 45 minutes. At the end of it, he gets a collection of about $17.50. If he played here in Maldives, imagine he got about 17.5 rupiah, right? But the question is, do you recognize this guy, though? If you look very closely, ma'am, do you want to take a guess? That is right. So this guy is an extremely popular violinist called Joshua Bell. In fact, he is the richest violinist in the world. His violin that he has is a Stradivarius violin that's insured for $10 million. Right? And 3 days after he performed at the subway railway station, he goes to Boston to perform in a really large auditorium where the cheapest tickets were about $1,000 if you were sitting at the very top. That's how much you would pay. And just on this day alone, this guy is a millionaire, just by that. And tickets were sold out like about some 4 months in advance or stuff. But what I want to ask is that the beautiful thing is, he performed only for 45 minutes. He used the same violin. He performed the exact sequence of music that he performed in the railway station. Not a minute more, not a minute less. 3 days back, he earns about $17. 3 days later, $1 million plus. What's the difference? Sorry? Sorry? Oh, the digital marketing? Very smart. You come to a digital marketing class, immediately you know it's a digital marketing answer, you know? As one. Yeah, Sri. The audience, it's a very different audience. The people who came to the railway station, they didn't come to hear the music. They came here to catch a train. Whereas 3 days later, people book 4 months in advance to hear this guy. But why would they want to hear this guy? Because they've listened to his music so many times. They're in awe of this guy. They want to see him in flesh and blood. They drop every other appointment, and they come out there, and they sit in the auditorium and listen, right? And that is the power of thought leadership. When I asked a question in Maldives of a guy who's living in the US, and there are people who recognize that this is Joshua Bell, the world's greatest living violinist. And you got to create, and the reason why that mind recall is there is because he's performed 1 million times so that we remember him well. And it's the same thing even that applies to each one of us in this auditorium. We are all, we're all thorough professionals. We want to be good at what we are doing. And we do that by letting the world know that this is our area of expertise. Right? So that's something that I want you to consider is you must showcase your skills. And as HR professionals, I think it is also your duty to enable and encourage your employees to open up and be stars I think that's a very important lesson for you to learn. The second advantage, okay, so let's hear from you guys. Your turn. Who wants to go? All right, thank you. What, your name, sir? Sorry. Yaz. Can I have a microphone here, if it's okay? All right. Yaz, just say that aloud. You have reputation coming before you, Yaz. Yeah? Okay, the microphone is coming to you. Yaz, we just stand up and just so that others can see you as well.
I hope you recognize me.
Yeah.
Yeah, one advantage is it can, at the end, help business growth. That's what I thought.
Excellent. Good question, good point about business growth. I'm going to quickly go to the business growth point. So thank you for that, Yaz. Let me give you an example, right? A real-world example. So I run a digital marketing company in India. I'm also a professor that teaches in 3B schools, but I'm a passionate organic farmer, and that is my farm. And a little bit, if you can peek deep inside, you will find a small little micro farmhouse for people to come in and stay. It's a farm stay where if they want to appreciate village life, they can come in and stay. You can come, yes. Yeah, come with your credit card. Yeah. So I want to share a real-world experience. So we opened this about 7 months ago. And what we consciously did right in the beginning, even about 6 months before even we laid the first brick, I started to talk about the concept of the farmhouse, why I'm so passionate about it, and how can people benefit. And I ran a daily blog, almost like a daily blog, documenting the birth of this house and how did it come about. I started to share all the good things that happened. I shared all the miserable mistakes that I did, all the failures that I went through, so that if anybody else were building a farmhouse on their own, they don't have to make the same mistakes as I did. They can follow all the good things that I'm doing. And it started to attract a certain kind of an audience that was very interested in this way of life. And here's the interesting thing, right? So it's just a very plain vanilla, I'm just documenting my thoughts. I would have a blog on the site and very sincerely open about all the things that I do. But here's the benefit that I reaped much later. Magazine. So this article came out in a site called The Better India, which is a fairly popular one. So this article appeared talking about that's my grandma and my mom, and they run the farmhouse. I just help them construct. I do a little bit of marketing, but they run the entire place. They cook amazing food, trust me. And mainstream publications started to follow this. Yesterday, there was this Condé Nast Traveler, which is supposed to be a very popular magazine. They ran a story about both of them. And every time the story came about, every single day, we received about 300 plus phone calls for leads coming in. Right? So right now, April was completely full out, and that got booked completely in March. May was completely booked out because it got booked in April itself. So June is already booked already, right? So just to give you paint a picture on the importance of you talking about your company, talking about what you're doing, talking about your project. So the more you actually encourage your employees to talk about the stuff that they're doing, the better is the reach, the better is the kind of audience that you'll attract for yourself, right? And this is, just to give you on Google, people really appreciate the direct storytelling. There are so many other better resorts. There's so many other better homestays. There's so much things that are better than what we can do. But what people can't replicate is the love and affection of my mom and my grandma. And that's the unique fingerprint, right? That can only be. So likewise, each one of our employees have something very unique. Let's bring out the best out of them, right? So that's a lesson that I wanted to share. All right, your turn now. Who wants to go? I want to see if you recognize this guy. So today afternoon, we went out for lunch. And while we were having lunch, Atif was sitting right next to me. And we were, so just to give you a background story, myself, and Afif, we took on a challenge, a book authoring challenge, right? So can we take up a short period of time, and can both of us collaborate, me sitting in Chennai in India and Afif sitting here in Maldives? Can we push each other, encourage each other, egg each other on to start writing? Because writing a book is like running a marathon, right? It's okay to run alone, but it can be a very lonesome journey. But when you run together as a group, it's so much more helpful. And when I started to know about this, I got to know that actually Atif is actually a manager in training and quality control. But interestingly, what Atif also said is that he does not have any prior experience in training and quality control, but he has. So I went and asked Afif, why did you pick up Atif if he didn't have any background? And Afif gave a brilliant answer. And the answer is, I saw Atif's website, I saw his writing, I saw he's actually on his way to author a book himself. He's very prolific in his blog, he writes poems. And Afif said, that's a quality that I'm looking for in my team, and that's what made me hire Atif. And I think that's a very powerful lesson for each one of us sitting in this hall, right? And the powerful lesson is, only if you encourage people to open up and talk will it attract the right set of audience, right? So I think it's super, super important. I want to somehow get a microphone to the very last one. I want to go to Sija. Hi, Sija. Hi. So Sija is the general manager of Barrows Maldives. You guys are aware of Barrows Maldives? It's like super. Do you know how much it costs per night? A little bit more than the farmhouse. You're correct. I fainted nearly. It's 10,000 rupiah per night, and I'm assuming that's your cheapest room.
You have already checked our website, right?
I did. Yes. So, and I spoke with Sija and said that, holy cow, 10,000 rupiah per night. And you know, they're doing very well for themselves. And so for the benefit of all of us, so what Sija told me that surprised me was about 40 to 50% of their revenues actually comes from direct booking.
Exactly, yes.
Right? There are people who are paying 10,000 rupiah per night to stay, and this is a super luxury thing. So talk to us about how did you manage to attract these people when there are hundreds of other resorts in Maldives?
Thank you so much. In Barrows, it has been, since this digital marketing came into practice, we have actually started this quite a long time back, and we have very well positioned ourselves within the market. And Barrows is one of the oldest resorts, I would say. We are going to celebrate 50 years next year.
Oh.
We have opened in 1973, so we have a good history. And what we have been doing is, we have a very good digital marketing team who has been looking after all our aspects, and we have, in our figures, we can see easily that in the last 4 or 5 years, we have increased a lot. Our direct booking has increased like tremendously within the last 3 years. And what we have been doing is closely monitoring, and of course, the talent that we have within our organization, not only Barrows, but within the whole Universal team, has brought this level to Barrows. And yes, social media, and apart from that, so many tools we have been using. Like every single day is the day that we are exploring. What are we going to do new? Mm. So I think that's the success behind our Barrows digital performance. And I'm very proud to say that we can be one of the best resorts in Maldives in terms of digital aspect.
There you go. There you go. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ibrahim, Shuja. That's awesome. So it also goes to show that we shouldn't forget the fact that while we are all working for corporate companies, while we may be working for resorts, don't forget that each one of us is our own brand. We are the CEO of our own brand. So just like how we take the effort to build companies' brands, it's important to look at ourselves as well. So that's a very important lesson for you. I missed one important point. I want to go back oops, sorry. Oh, sorry. Let me just go back. I want to talk about this particular point. Yeah. So this is so about 11 years back. It's a story that goes about 11 years back. I wanted to surprise my wife on our 10th wedding anniversary. Right? So what did I do? I secretly booked a resort. I forget the place. It's in Malaysia. 2 months in advance. I bought flight tickets 2 months in advance, booked the resort, done all the groundwork, and on the day prior to our anniversary is when the flight takes off at night. I tell my wife, let's go to your auntie's place, which is close by to the airport. Now, she should have smelled something because in all my years I'm married to her, I've never voluntarily taken once to a relative's place. Never, right? So she didn't smell anything. Anyway, we sit in the car, we drive towards the airport, and then we quickly take a right turn into the airport. She's like surprised, and a big reveal. All her bags are all previously packed. And so she's like super thrilled, super happy, the surprise of her life. Until I realized it was a surprise of my life. I go to the counter, and I give my papers, my ticket details. And the guy looks at this. He types something into the computer, and then he looks at me. He looks back into the computer, calls his friend. Both of them look into the computer, and both of them look at me. I knew that was trouble right there. And that's when they said, "Sir, your wife can travel, but you cannot." What kind of a honeymoon is this going to be, guys? So I'm like, what are you talking about? I booked this like 2 months in advance. He said, no, it doesn't reflect on our system. Sorry, we can't help you. I'm like seething with anger. And then he said, listen, we have one ticket that's remaining. If you rush, if you're maybe in time, you might be able to book. So I run across to the other side of the airport, and I buy the ticket. I pay 3 times the price because it's last minute. I pick it up. I'm sweating. We were the last guys to board the flight. I'm sitting down, and as I'm sitting, you should have seen my heart pounding, and I'm raging with anger, right? I want this to be a memorable time for my wife, and I have to drag her along the floor into the airport. So it's like, and so this is what I did. And this is the tweet that I made, right? So ClearTrip took my money and did not book my thing. I had a harrowing experience. I gave a link, and the link takes me to this website. Sorry. Let me go back. So I wrote about it, and so I didn't write about this. This is from the ClearTrip guys. And what happened is, when I made the blog post on my blog, which is not here, for some reason, I think all the husbands empathized with my problem. And so the story became very viral. There were like some 5,000 shares of that blog on Facebook across. So it really it spread around. The next day, all the major TV channels came and covered the story, right? But it's not the story that you think they covered. You know what the story they covered? They covered the story about how ClearTrip, they went to their blog and they talked about my problem and how this is the CEO of ClearTrip. He goes and writes about it, saying that, yes, they made a mistake, and here is how they're going to rectify it, and this is how any further persons will not have a problem. They followed it up with the lessons learned, and every single TV channel went and said how great ClearTrip is. I said, what the hell, yaar? I was the one who got jacked, and then they won. But this is a classic story of how a company with their ears close to the ground hear complaints immediately, take action, but also tell the world how they took action. And they went from being, villains to immediate heroes, right? And I think it's a solid lesson it helps for companies to be very socially active, and that's why it's important for you guys to be Okay, let's go to the next one. Now, how do we do this, right? We do this by, and here are the 10 tips, and I have six minutes left, so I want to encapsulate all my key points in about 10 tips for you to do, and this is your takeaway for all HR professionals. Tip number one, just because you know social media, don't assume everybody else in the company does. So take the effort to train all the staff right from bottom down to the top. I've worked within the hospitality industry for about 22 years now, and I understand the importance. There is churn, there is different layers of employees and their intelligence and their education. So every person actually has a touch point. Like, for example, Srijata, she landed in the airport, and I remember Srijata telling that she lands at the airport, and there's this person comes to pick up on behalf of MAHRP. Takes in a van, is that right, Sri? And then the guy, his job was only to pick up Srijata and drop at Hotel Jen. But in the journey, the 10-minute journey from the airport, he took the effort to explain all the things about Maldives and gave. And that's your first, you've never stayed in Hotel Jen before. But what was your impression about Jen, right? Already wow. And this is because the guy became the brand ambassador, right? Self-appointed brand ambassador for Hotel Jen. I think that's the power of ensuring that every single person has a touch point. I think that'll be brilliant for us to do. The second tip, you got to have a clearly well-defined social media strategy. I run a digital marketing agency. I'm a professor of digital marketing. My job is to find out what happens in corporate companies and how can they succeed. And I can't tell you enough, these are famous companies, well-known global companies who face problem because employees have done something inadvertently without knowing that they will get themselves into a soup. And you got to have this clear black and white social media policy and what is it you can do, what is it you can't do, and it's super, super helpful for you to write a very, very clear, well-defined one. Also, you need to have pecking order of importance on who's going to own social media. Like Sija said at Barrows, they have a digital marketing team. I'm assuming most resorts, what they name, will have your own team. Some may have internal teams, some might have outsourced to an external agency. But internally, there has to be a person where the buck stops with that person. And so it's very important for everybody to know who's the go-to person immediately when it comes to any crisis on social media. One of my pet peeves with HR department, right? So don't get me wrong when I tell you this. I'd like to call spade a spade. Our job is to ensure that work gets done. Our job is to ensure that all employees toe the line. Our job ensures that people are productive, happy, all that. When we write down rules, because of the nature of rules, they tend to be very clampish. You can't do this. You shouldn't do. Right? That's how rules typically are. But it's important for you to also highlight the fact that when you do this, how can you benefit as an individual, right? Sure, the company benefits, but you got to highlight how is it that the individual in him, how they benefit. I think it's very important you bring that out. Take real-world examples of mistakes that not only your company has done, but other companies have done. You can learn so much by the goof-ups of other companies. Take that as a show-and-tell mechanism and tell people this is what you can't do. So when people are using social media, what are some of the tips they can do that will help them and that will also help the companies? So while you're talking about what not to do, you should also talk about what are the best things that you can do. And that's a brilliant one. I mean, I'm sure you're thinking, oh yes, oh what brilliant insights. This is so common sense-ish. But because it is common sense-ish, most of us, we tend to ignore this, right? And we only start to give our attention when things go wrong, horribly, right? So let's be careful with that. Point number 7. We wear 2 hats between whatever, 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, whichever time we are working, we work with as an employee. Then we go back home, we are an individual. But we also have our individual social media presence. And there's a very fine line between an individual and an employee. So you got to be careful about how you do that. 8th point, I'm sure every company has guidelines, and you have to ensure that what you do what is a real world guideline? So for example, be courteous to employees has nothing to do with social media or digital. But be courteous to employees. When an employee comes and complains, acknowledge the mistake is something that we are all taught. And so what you need to do is apply those commonsensical principles to the digital world as well. Right? And the ninth one, this is critical. While we empower all our employees, we have to ensure that your branding, your colors, your font size, your font style are all in, or the tonality of your tone. Does it go well with how the company's language is spoken? That's also something that will be well worth letting people know. Not for every employee, that's not possible, but there are digital brand ambassadors within the company. And for them, I strongly advise this meeting. And the final one, this is important, they got to have fun doing this. And when they have fun doing this, remarkable how the assimilation of those points sink in deeper, and it almost comes naturally when they start doing it. So these are the points. Now, as a way of saying thank you to you, so this is the 7th book that I'm working on, and it's a book about what lessons, leadership lessons, that we can learn from Olympians and sports personalities that we can apply to working professionals. Something that I've been working for multiple years. It's actually launching 1 month before the next Olympics, so I'm truly passionate about this. And just as a way of saying thank you to all of you being out there, if you just send me an email to me, I'll gladly send you a digital copy of this book to you as a mark of gratitude. So I want to take lessons from Adam. So I want to say, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. You've been absolutely wonderful. A great first day session. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you, Kiruba, on sharing your personal experience as well on the power of using digital media.